My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 33 years old. Just last Tuesday, my husband, John, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. To say the shock has been overwhelming is an understatement. I remember when I first called my parents, sobbing uncontrollably, and all my mom could say was, "We're celebrating Emma's birthday right now. Can this wait until tomorrow?" That hit me like a punch to the gut. My 7-year-old daughter, Ella, and I spent the night huddled together trying to understand what had just happened as our whole world crumbled. Never in my wildest dreams did I think my own family would turn their backs on us in the midst of such devastation. But what came next was even harder to bear. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people you needed the most, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Please subscribe and join others who can relate to this kind of pain. John and I met during our sophomore year at the University of Michigan. I was struggling in economics, and he was this bright, charismatic teaching assistant who would stay after class to help me with concepts I just couldn't grasp. I was drawn to his patience, his sense of humor, and the way his eyes lit up when he smiled. We became close friends, and over time, I fell in love with him. We spent the next few years together in college, and on graduation day, John proposed to me in the most unexpected way, hiding the engagement ring inside my diploma case. We got married young, at 24, despite everyone telling us we should live a little before settling down. But for me, John was always my life. He was the person I wanted to experience everything with. After getting his MBA, John landed a job at a top financial firm in Chicago. He quickly rose through the ranks, earning a reputation for being both brilliant with numbers and genuine with clients. He cared about people, and that's what made him stand out in his field. We spent 5 wonderful years as a couple before deciding to try for a baby. What we thought would be an easy journey turned into a painful struggle. 2 miscarriages and countless failed IVF attempts left us emotionally drained. We started to consider adoption when, against all odds, I found out I was pregnant with Ella. The pregnancy was tough. I was on bed rest for 2 months, and John worked from home to take care of me. He would bring me breakfast in bed, rub my swollen feet, and read pregnancy books to both me and our unborn daughter. When Ella was born, John was the first one to break down in tears, holding her so gently like she was fragile glass. For the next 7 years, we lived a picture-perfect life as a family. John coached Ella's soccer team, even though he didn't know the first thing about soccer. He learned alongside her, watching YouTube tutorials at night after she went to bed. He was there for every school event, every doctor's appointment. He'd color-code his calendar with reminders about Ella's activities. It was all about family with John, and he made sure Ella and I knew how loved we were. But there were warning signs about his health. A few occasional chest pains, shortness of breath that he chalked up to being out of shape, and slightly elevated blood pressure that the doctor dismissed as normal for someone with a high-stress job. He was told to take some aspirin, exercise more, and cut back on sodium, simple advice that we both took for granted. The morning it happened started just like any other Tuesday. John made dinosaur-shaped pancakes for Ella while I packed her lunch. He kissed us both goodbye, promised he'd be home early for Ella's school art show, and left for work. His last words to me were, "Don't forget to pick up real maple syrup, not that corn syrup junk." Just the usual conversation, mundane, almost trivial in hindsight. At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Emily, John's assistant, and her voice was so shaky I could barely make out what she was saying. "Sarah, John collapsed during a meeting. The ambulance is here. They're taking him to Northwestern Memorial." I dropped my coffee mug. The sound of it shattering on the tile floor is something I'll never forget. I called our neighbor, Linda, to pick up Ella from school and drove to the hospital as fast as I could. I kept praying, begging God to somehow reverse time, to bring him back, but by the time I arrived, it was too late. John had been pronounced dead at 11:23 a.m., just minutes before I got there. A massive heart attack, they said. There was nothing anyone could have done. Seeing his lifeless body was surreal. He looked like he was sleeping, but his chest was still, no longer rising and falling with the breath that had once been so familiar. His skin was warm when I touched his face, and for a fleeting moment I kept thinking he would open his eyes and smile, telling me this was all a mistake. The hours that followed felt like a blur. I was inundated with paperwork, decisions I wasn't prepared to make. Cremation or burial? What kind of service? What was his favorite suit? I couldn't even think straight. All I wanted to do was curl up beside John, just one last time. The hardest part came later that day, when I had to tell Ella. How do you explain death to a 7-year-old? How do you tell her that the daddy who made her pancakes that morning would never come home again? When she asked where he was, I pulled over on the side of the road because I couldn't focus. I took her hands in mine and tried to explain it the best I could. "Sweetheart, something very sad happened today. Daddy got very sick at work and his heart stopped." Ella looked up at me, confused. "Can the doctors fix it?" she asked, her innocent hope in her voice. "No, sweetie," I choked out. "When someone's heart stops completely, the doctors can't fix it. Daddy died today." Ella stared at me, her big brown eyes processing this information, and then she asked, "Does that mean Daddy isn't coming home ever?" When I nodded, unable to speak through my tears, she let out a cry I'll never forget. It was so primal, the sound of a child's grief. She threw herself into my arms, shaking with sobs. "I want Daddy," she wailed. "Please, I want my Daddy." All I could do was hold her and cry with her, parked on the side of the road, as life continued around us, oblivious to our pain. That night, after I finally managed to get Ella to sleep in my bed, clutching one of John's old t-shirts for comfort, the weight of my loss hit me. I collapsed onto the bathroom floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't breathe. I needed my mom, my dad. I needed someone. With trembling hands, I called my parents. I needed them now more than ever, even though I had no idea what they could possibly say to make this pain any easier. When my mom answered, I could barely speak through my sobs. "Mom, it's John. He's gone. He died this morning of a heart attack." There was a long pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. My mom finally came back on the line. "Oh my goodness, that's terrible," she said, her voice flat, as if she wasn't fully processing what I had just said. "But, sweetie, we're in the middle of Emma's birthday dinner right now. Can this wait until tomorrow?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom, the person who should have been there for me in this darkest moment, was brushing me off to continue celebrating my niece's birthday. A celebration that, in the grand scheme of things, felt completely insignificant. "Are you serious?" I managed to choke out. My mom hesitated, and then she said, "We'll talk tomorrow, okay? You'll be all right, won't you?" And just like that, the call ended. I sat there in disbelief, clutching the phone, still unable to fully grasp what had just happened. The world had lost the one person who had truly mattered, and in that moment my family, my parents, were nowhere to be found. They didn't even offer to come over or ask how I was holding up. It felt like I was floating in space, alone with my grief. John's passing hit me hard, but what happened next felt like another layer of betrayal. Just a few hours after my mom's dismissive phone call, my father called. His voice was calmer, almost like nothing had changed. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, as though we were having a normal conversation. Then, without skipping a beat, he added, "Is the life insurance policy up to date? You should probably call the company tomorrow." I froze. The sheer audacity of it. My husband, my partner in life, had just died, and my father, who should have been comforting me, was asking about money. It felt like a slap in the face. "Dad, are you seriously asking about life insurance right now?" I couldn't hold it in any longer, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "My husband is dead, and all you can think about is the money? Not how I'm doing or how Ella is coping, but about the policy?" My father, as if he didn't understand why I was upset, responded with that same condescending tone he always used. "We're just trying to be practical, Sarah. We've been helping you your whole life. You should be helping us now." His words stung like nothing I had ever felt before. My own father was now telling me that I owed them something, that somehow my husband's death should benefit them too. I hung up, tears streaming down my face. The rest of the evening was a blur. My neighbors and friends began to reach out, offering their condolences, asking if they could do anything. Meanwhile, my family remained absent, as if they didn't even know how to deal with the reality of what had happened. The next few days were filled with logistical nightmares. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, phone calls I wasn't prepared to make. Each task felt like a mountain to climb. And throughout it all, my family did not reach out to help. My mother didn't call. My father didn't offer a word of comfort. The emotional distance between us grew, but what hurt the most was knowing that they had no intention of showing up when I needed them the most. It was during this time that my best friend, Amanda, became my lifeline. She kept checking in, making sure I was taking care of Ella and myself. She brought over meals, stayed with me during the sleepless nights, and let me vent my frustrations. It was Amanda who first suggested I should be prepared for my family to continue acting this way, to demand more from me in the coming days. I couldn't imagine it getting any worse, but Amanda, with her blunt honesty, had already seen the signs. By the time the funeral arrived, it felt like a formality. My parents barely showed up on time, texting me at the last minute to ask about the service details. They came, yes, but it was clear they were more interested in the logistics than the grief. My mother barely managed a hug, and my father only offered a quick, impersonal, "Sorry for your loss." At the reception afterward, I overheard my dad talking to Uncle Steve about John's career and the potential financial security that I would now have. As if John's death were somehow just another financial transaction. I couldn't bear it. The only people who seemed genuinely devastated by John's death were his colleagues and friends. They shared stories, tears in their eyes, remembering the man who had been such an integral part of their lives. But my own family? They made it clear that their primary concern was money. As I walked through my own home, I could feel the disconnection between me and my parents. It wasn't just their absence in my grief. It was their complete failure to acknowledge the emotional devastation that came with losing John. It was a harsh reality, but as the days passed, I began to see the truth of it. My family, my own parents, were incapable of showing up for me in the way I needed them to. But John's family, His parents and my friends, they were there. They stood beside me, offering comfort, love, and support when I felt the most alone. By the time we got through the funeral and the initial aftermath, the damage to my relationship with my parents felt irreparable. I had been so focused on getting through the practical details that I didn't have the space to grieve properly. But when my parents made a stunning demand a couple of weeks later, I realized that this wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about manipulation. And I wasn't going to let them treat me or Ella that way. Part 3. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to sort through the mess of life insurance paperwork, when the doorbell rang. Ella was at school, her first full week back since losing her dad, and the teachers were doing their best to keep an eye on her, sending me regular updates. It was the only thing that gave me some peace, knowing that she was being looked after during the day. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I saw my parents standing at the door, I felt a wave of frustration rise up in me. My father straightened his golf shirt as if nothing had happened, while my mom checked her reflection in a compact mirror, as if she were— That should have been my first clue. My mom always had a way of turning every situation into something about her, and this wasn't going to be any different. I let them settle into the living room while I went to make coffee. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to host my parents as if they had been there for me in any meaningful way since John passed. They should have been the ones comforting me, not the other way around. But I played the hostess role out of habit. When I brought the coffee into the room, my father was already inspecting the new sound system that John had installed just a month before he passed. "Nice setup," he said, running his hand along the speakers. John had good taste in electronics. It took everything I had not to lash out at him. My husband had died, and here was my father, barely acknowledging the depth of my pain, more interested in the speakers than in how I was holding up. I tried to keep my cool. "He did," I agreed quietly, "but I need to focus on something else right now." I sat down hoping they would sense my discomfort and not press on, but of course they did. After a few awkward minutes, my father leaned forward in his chair, his expression turning serious. "Sarah, we wanted to talk to you about your situation," he said, glancing at my mom, who nodded along as if they had already discussed it. "Your financial situation." I stared at him, not sure if I'd heard him correctly. "My financial situation?" I repeated, confused. "What are you talking about?" My mother clarified, her voice cool and businesslike. "Well, now that you're adjusting to life without John, we thought we should discuss how you're managing. We've been helping you for years, after all, with school, the down payment on your house, and other things. We're getting older, Sarah, and with health care costs rising, we thought, maybe you could help us out now." I felt the blood drain from my face. Was this really happening? After everything, after losing John, my parents were sitting here asking for money. My husband's life insurance payout. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even wrap my mind around the audacity of it. Are you seriously asking me for money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. "I just buried my husband, and you're asking me for a handout? This isn't about money. This is about losing John, the love of my life. What do you want from me? How can you even think about this right now?" My father's face hardened, but he didn't back down. "Sarah, this is just practical financial planning. You've come into some money now, and it makes sense for you to help out your parents. We've done so much for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You've done so much for me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've barely been there for me at all. You didn't show up when John died. You didn't even offer to help with Ella. And now you think you're entitled to my money? To help with your retirement? Are you out of your mind?" My mother's face flushed with irritation. "We're not asking for a handout," she said, her tone sharp. "We're just trying to make sure we're taken care of. You've had your time to grieve, but now it's time to think about the bigger picture. We're your parents. We raised you. We deserve some consideration." I shook my head, unable to comprehend what was happening. "I don't owe you anything, especially not now," I said, my voice cold. "You've shown no empathy, no care for me or for Ella. You didn't even come to John's funeral on time. And now you're asking for money? No, I'm done." My mother started to speak again, but I couldn't listen anymore. "Get out," I said, my voice firm, though I could feel the tears building up. "Get out of my house." They stood, looking completely bewildered, as if they couldn't understand why I was so upset. "We just wanted to talk about your situation," my father said stiffly. "You should think about this rationally, Sarah." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Rational? After everything you've done? You don't get to lecture me on being rational. You didn't care about us when we needed you, and now you think you deserve something in return?" With that, I slammed the door behind them, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. The nerve of them, to come here with their hands out when they hadn't been there for me when I needed them most. The rest of the day was a blur. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my parents, then Sophia, all full of accusations and guilt. My parents were relentless, texting and calling, trying to manipulate me into a meeting. I couldn't even begin to deal with it. I knew I had to protect Ella from all of this, so I put the phone on silent and tried to focus on her, on the little bit of normal we had left. But then, later that night, something happened that I never expected. Ella, in her quiet way, showed me a side of her that I hadn't fully seen before. She asked me, "Why were Grandma and Grandpa here today?" The question took me by surprise. I hesitated before answering. "They wanted to talk, sweetie," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But it wasn't a good time. It wasn't the right thing." Ella looked down, her small voice barely a whisper. "Did they ask about Daddy's money?" The fact that she had overheard such a thing, I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. "You're right, honey. But we're going to be okay. We have each other, and that's all we need." The next few days were an emotional roller coaster. My parents continued to send messages, but I was done reading them. They ranged from tearful apologies to manipulative demands, with the same message at the core. They wanted money. They were trying to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself, but I wasn't backing down. It was hard enough dealing with the grief of losing John, but now I had to navigate the emotional turmoil caused by my own family. Ella was struggling, and I was determined to shield her from all of it. I knew that I had to set firm boundaries, but it was harder than I had imagined. Every text, every phone call from my parents felt like a new weight added to my already broken heart. Then came the unexpected. One day, just after I'd dropped Ella off at school, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my parents. I didn't want to open it. I was so tired of their manipulative tactics. But something urged me to read it. I ripped open the envelope and unfolded the letter. It was handwritten, which was a first. And when I began to read, I was stunned. "Dear Sarah and Ella, we've spent the past weeks reflecting on our behavior, and we realize the pain we've caused you. There are no excuses for what we did, and we failed you both in the worst possible way. We allowed greed and selfishness to take precedence over our love and responsibility as your parents and grandparents. We see that now, and we're deeply sorry. Please know that we understand the hurt we've caused. We never meant to turn a tragedy into an opportunity, and we regret that more than words can express. We've been selfish, and we've failed you. We ask for no forgiveness, but we hope in time you can see that we are truly sorry. We would love to make things right, but we understand that this will take time and effort. If you ever feel ready, we hope we can start rebuilding our relationship with respect, patience, and love. With all our love, Mom and Dad. The letter was a lot to take in. It was the first real acknowledgement of how wrong they had been, and it left me feeling conflicted. For so long, I had wished for this kind of honesty, this kind of remorse. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I sat down on the couch, staring at the letter for what felt like an eternity. Ella had just gotten back from school, and she came into the room with a concerned look on her face. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked, her big brown eyes full of worry. I showed her the letter, and she read it in silence. When she finished, she looked up at me, her face so much like John's. "Do you think they mean it, Mom?" I wasn't sure how to answer. It was hard to know. They had never really taken responsibility for their actions before. But this was different. At least, it seemed that way. "I think they're trying to be better," I said, my voice shaky, "but I'm not sure yet. They've hurt us, Ella, and it's going to take time to rebuild that trust, if we even can." Ella nodded thoughtfully. "I want to believe them, Mom, but I don't want them to hurt us again." I hugged her tight, grateful for her wisdom beyond her years. "Me neither, baby, me neither." That night, I thought long and hard about what to do next. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine after everything they had done. But could I keep holding on to the anger? To the resentment? Was there room in my heart for forgiveness, or was it time to let go and move on? It wasn't a decision I could make overnight. So I did what I always do when I'm unsure. I called Marcus. Marcus had flown back to Japan for a short time, but he'd promised to visit again soon. He was my rock, and I knew I could talk to him about anything. When I explained what had happened with my parents, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I think you need to take your time, Sarah. This is your healing process, not theirs. They've hurt you, and they need to prove they're worthy of your trust. But don't feel pressured to forgive them just because they're asking for it. You and Ella come first." I felt a wave of relief wash over me at his words. He was right. This wasn't about what they wanted. It was about me and Ella healing at our own pace, on our own terms. The following week, I received another unexpected message, this time from my sister Emma. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But when I saw her name on my phone, I decided to pick up. "Hey, Emma," I said cautiously. "Hey, Sarah," she replied, her voice hesitant. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. I know you're going through a lot, and I didn't handle things well at all. I've been thinking about you, and I realize now that I wasn't there for you when you needed me, and I should have been. I know we've had our differences, but I'm here for you, if you want to talk." I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all the family drama, Emma was reaching out. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to heal some of the wounds between us. "I appreciate you saying that, Emma," I said, my voice softening. "It's been tough, but I'm starting to realize that there are people who have supported me, even if it wasn't who I expected." We talked for a while. The days turned into weeks, and I continued to focus on what was best for Ella and me. We had our good days and bad days, but I could feel the weight of grief slowly lifting. We weren't over it, not by any means, but we were moving forward. And that was all we could do. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with another message from my parents. This time, the tone was different. It was a simple request. They wanted to meet in person, just to talk. No pressure, no demands. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart heavy with uncertainty. Was it time to see them? Was I ready to hear what they had to say? I didn't know yet. But as I looked over at Ella, who was busy with her homework, I realized something. No matter what happened, we had each other, and that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. A week passed since I'd received the message from my parents, asking to meet. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had told myself I wasn't ready to face them, but deep down, I knew I was running out of excuses. Ella needed closure too. She'd been asking a lot of questions about my parents, and as much as I wanted to shield her from the fallout, I knew she deserved the truth, the full picture, not just the side that protected her from the pain. But I wasn't sure if I could handle another heartbreak. I wasn't sure I could sit across from them without feeling the weight of all the resentment I had carried since John's death. Still, the idea of keeping this Cold War going, of teaching Ella to hold on to anger when maybe, just maybe, there was a path to forgiveness, didn't feel right either. I had to see them. I had to see for myself if there was any possibility of rebuilding this broken relationship. The morning of the meeting, I dressed casually, choosing comfort over formality. I needed to feel grounded. Ella had already left for school, so I had some time to gather my thoughts. I wasn't nervous. I was just tired. Tired of the drama, tired of the manipulation, tired of carrying this weight that my parents had added to my grief. When I arrived at the coffee shop, my parents were already there. My father sat in the corner, his hands folded in front of him, his posture stiff as always. My mother was on the other side of the table, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. There was no I wasn't sure if I believed her yet, but I could see the remorse in her eyes. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A small piece of honesty in the mess they'd made. "You're right," I said quietly. "We needed you. Ella needed you. But instead of showing up, you just showed up with demands. You made it about money instead of love, and it broke me." My father shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't interrupt. Instead, he let me speak. "I can't tell you how much I've thought about that day," he said, his voice low. "I know I've been distant, and I know I've never been the father you needed. I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late. I'm sorry for that. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope one day you will." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long while. He seemed vulnerable in that moment. My dad had always been a man of pride, of quiet authority, but now he looked small. Forgiveness is not something that happens overnight, I said, my voice steady. It's not something you can ask for and just receive. You have to earn it, and you haven't done that yet. I know, he said quietly, but I want to try. I don't want to lose my daughter and granddaughter over my mistakes. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. The anger, the hurt, the years of unmet expectations. But something inside me shifted. The anger was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. It wasn't the only feeling I had anymore. You've got a long road ahead of you, I said finally. And so do I. But we can't just keep pretending. We can't keep pretending like nothing happened. We need to make real change, not for me, but for Ella. She's still so young, and I don't want her growing up thinking that love is conditional. My mom wiped her eyes, nodding. We understand. We'll do whatever it takes. I wasn't sure if they could change, but I was willing to give them a chance. Not for me, but for Ella. She deserved to know her grandparents, real, supportive grandparents, if they could prove they were worthy of that role. We talked for another hour, discussing what had happened, what needed to change, and what our future relationship could look like. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were moments of silence, moments where I felt my patience wearing thin. But by the end of it, I was surprised to find myself feeling lighter. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not closure, but peace. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I hope so, baby. I really hope so. In that moment, I realized that John's love, his patience, his care for me, his unwavering belief in family, had been the foundation we needed to move forward. I could carry that with me. We could carry that with us, and maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us to heal. As the weeks passed, my parents did show up more slowly, cautiously, but they were trying. And I saw it. For the first time, I saw them working to repair what they had broken. Things weren't perfect, and I didn't expect them to be, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. We still had a long way to go, but as Ella and I sat on the porch that evening watching the sunset, I knew we would be okay, because we had each other, and that, above all else, was enough. Thank you for listening to our story. If you've ever had to rebuild a relationship after betrayal or loss, know that you're not alone. Healing isn't easy, but it's possible. Remember, love and respect aren't just words, they're actions. Take care of yourselves and the people who matter most. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.